Sir, thank you so much for joining us on your day off from Into the Woods. This is fantastic for us. Really appreciate your time. And
it's great for me. Annie recommends you highly, Annie Golden, and so what's good for her is good for me.
We love Annie. Yeah,
Nice.
Annie. My brother co-wrote a musical for Annie for Broadway Bounty Hunter. Was written by my brother, a guy named Joe Iconis, and Jason Sweet Tooth Williams. I don't know if you know those guys, but so they wrote that musical for Annie, and it was phenomenal. It was it didn't get a very long run, unfortunately, but 70s kind of like blaxploitation. She's hunting, she's a bounty hunter. It was phenomenal. It was so funny.
It's ahead of its time. Maybe it'll
Really?
make a comeback.
Really?
I got to say, Mr. Kelly, before we came on the air, Dustin and I were talking, and I said, on a short list of like people that I've always wanted to have on the show, you're at the top of the list.
Oh, that's really kind of you.
In your film, your voice as a singer and as a musician and as just an all-around artist is truly admirable. We're big fans.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. I think you can see some of my guitars in the background there.
Sure can.
Yeah.
Sure can.
I'm working on a play. I like plays with music. Thank you. It's very generous, kind comments of you. And please call me DP. That's the going thing these days.
You got it.
I was one of the early 3-name actors, so I had to find some way to codify. So DP is fine. Thank
DPK.
you. But these guitars now, this is from the great, I think it's a Midwest. It's out of Detroit or Toronto, something. Eastwood guitars. They make repros of wacky, different kinds of guitars, which are excellent guitars.
Nice.
So,
how long have you played?
Well, my mother gave me my mandolin in 1964 as a legend, and this company name Kept Window. I don't know if you can see that or not.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Kept Window.
Yep.
So we would walk to church, and I just saw this mandolin in the Pied Piper music store, and I didn't say I want that or anything. We were quite not to sing the blues, but we didn't have any money. 7 kids and post World War II, but one day on St. Patrick's Day, 1964, she presented me with this mandolin, and I said, "Mom, how'd you do that? We don't have any money." She said, "I just prayed that it would still be in the window," and I kept it in the window. So that's the name of the company.
Amazing!
Where I do my music publishing, and hopefully we'll produce some plays and things. And my whole career, I've written plays with music. I like Shakespeare and Brecht, and they have plays with music rather than full-blown musicals. And Annie and I and other people have tried to bring the spirit of rock and roll. Annie Golden, she and I shared a bill at CBGBs in 1975 with the Talking Heads and Blondie and the Ramones, and everybody in 1975 did not have recording contracts.
No.
And Hilly Crystal, this eccentric dude, had this kind of Hell's Angel drinking bar down on the Bowery, and he the name CBGB stands for Country, Bluegrass, and Blues, which was his thing. Older guy, Air Force paratrooper or something like that, and but he decided to let bands, more and more bands said, "Can we play here?" And he said, "Okay, as long as you play only your own music, only original music." So he started that scene, and it was, it's up there with the Cavern Club and all these other places, as a place where people knew that they had to be creative, super creative to be in there, So we were on that, but then we, went into acting. I've always been concentrating on acting all my life, but always had the parallel music with it, So playing the mandolin, I taught myself and played it as a rhythm guitar in my high school band, the Zupan Band in Detroit, Michigan. We're a well-known dance band. We opened for Bob Seger when he was a local hero there.
I slept on his couch, by the way.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Man, does he talk like the way he sings? He used to talk just like he sings.
He does. My mom was dating a piano tuner and wound up on his couch, fell asleep, and he woke me up and he goes, "Time to wake up, little man." And the next thing you know, we're going to his softball game. He had a softball team called the Silver Bullets.
Wow.
Original, right? And and
was there a guy named Rick Manasseh around then?
That name sounds really familiar. I think
he played keyboards for him. He was also at our high school, Bishop Gallagher High School.
Wow, what a trip!
Oh, wow.
Okay.
East side of Detroit. But I'd go up to him because he had only one local hit at that time. In the '60s, mid '60s, heavy music. Don't you ever listen to the radio?
Yeah.
And I said, "How do you sing like that?" And he said, "Man, you just gotta sing as hard as you can." I said, "Wow." 16 years old,
As hard as you can.
Hard as you can.
Yeah.
And he still does. He still does.
I mean, he's going strong. Yeah, he's selling out venues across the country still. I don't know if he's still touring, but he was
No, he retired finally. Meatloaf and I were in Hair. We both started at the same time.
Yeah.
In Hair in Detroit. We were both, I think he was a couple of years old, and God bless him. I just saw him. We did a photo session for the New York Times about 4 years ago, me and Meatloaf.
Rest in peace.
And it was all the people who were in Hair and started in Hair,
Wow.
And it was great to see him. I hadn't seen him in like 35 years or something like that, so we started in that, and there was another lady named Stoney, and she sang backup for Bob Seger from all his whole career, but she was in Hair with us as well. Yeah. Sean Murphy is her name. And, but she was known as Stoney back in the 70s when we started in Hair, and so she told me, that he just retired. They did their final tour, and he lives somewhere near Lake Orion. How do you say it? We say it different ways. Lake Orion, Lake Orion.
I think yeah. He's one of the few guys that hung up his touring keys and basically, called it a day versus calling a tour a farewell tour and then touring the following year. So.
Yeah, right. The endless tour.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I mean, we obviously want to talk about your acting career, but you had posted a video on Instagram of you and Annie performing one of the songs that you sang at CBGBs in 1975. And I had shared it on our page, our personal Instagram page, and Dustin and I were communicating back and forth. I said, "This is beautiful. Like the harmony, just the sound. I could listen to that and watch it all day. It was really fantastic."
You. Yeah, we got a lot of feedback for that. What happened was, I don't know. I think Annie and I didn't feel like they were paying enough attention to us. So I got permission to go up on the roof there. As seniors, there's some ageism involved, fellows. I don't know if you know about that. You'll find out, but you just keep kicking ass and everything, it works out.
We're trying.
And so I went back to Annie's, and it was so fast and furious, CBGBs, that original scene, that I hadn't really listened much to her first record that she did with her band, The Shirts. And it's so interesting. It's so interesting of its time. There's the bands, Television, Patti Smith, the Ramones, but they really had something going on with Annie and their harmonies and their eccentric time signatures and stuff. And so it came full circle to that country, bluegrass, and blues CBGBs logo, for me to take the mandolin and break down her song. And we did Annie was very funny about it. They call them mashups now. The kids call them mashups.
Yeah.
And she said, in her inimitable accent, she said, "We used to call them medleys. So, we did that, and I loved singing her song with her. And that's the first time we've ever sung together before.
Oh, really?
And so we didn't know. So we're working on another one right now for
how cool,
for a similar thing. But it was fun to get up on the roof there at the St. James Theater and publicize the fact that we're in Into the Woods at the same time. because David Byrne, our old CBGB's Bill mate, had just finished up not too long ago with American Utopia there.
That's right.
So
that's right.
The rock goes on.
Look, I was thinking, move over Robert Plant and Alison Krauss. You guys gotta,
really.
There's room for everybody.
Well, it was interesting. I finally put out an album only in 2008, and it was somebody holding up a cassette recorder at CBGB's, and I just got somebody to remix it and put it out, because the mission was, there were other people besides the people who got so incredibly famous with that. There was other interesting stuff going on. I mean, I hadn't listened to the Velvet Underground, but I had a brilliant electric violist in my band. I played guitar and bass and drums, and it was very simple, but it was a different sound, And then after that, I saw Bob Dylan for his Rolling Thunder. He picked up a violin, and David Byrne had somebody come in for his violin, So just to see these influences, there was a band called Orchestra Luna that were and that was Carla DeVito, who, she took over and went on tour with Meatloaf after that. There was, the Dead Boys, there was, on and on. Really, it was an interesting scene, was the point of putting out the record and to show. You can even hear people playing pool in the background on some of the tapes, as we're playing.
Oh, wow, that's wild.
In 1975, So, there was a lot going on there. And Annie's was, they were really moving, before she went totally into acting, But there was the usual stuff with management and all that kind of stuff that happens with bands. It's such a, I don't know, it's a rough business, man. So I really appreciate anybody who, transcends and achieves stuff.
Well, I mean, you just only a handful of years later are starring in what I consider my Star Wars, my holy grail of movies, The Warriors. It is, Dustin knows this. I've seen it well over 50 times.
Favorite film of all time.
It brought together one of my closest friends and I, Terry Chapman. He and I were connected through that movie because we loved it so much, and no one knew what it was at the time in our circle. It just, your performance as Luther, you just tore the house down, and to this day holds up from beginning to end.
Oh, that's really great that you say that. We worked really hard on it. I was relatively old when I was 27, Okay, most of the people were like earlier, 22 or 24, some of the actors, And so I'd had a wealth of experience, before that, with including the CBGB's gig, doing all kinds of plays. I did Chekhov at the Brooklyn Academy of Music with Margaret Hamilton. You know who that is? She was the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wizard of Oz. Chekhov with Ellen Burstyn and wrote the music for that. We did the incidental music in that.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, they had a screening. I don't know what year it is, 40-year anniversary at what is now the BAM Rose Cinema, the Brooklyn Academy of Music Rose Cinema, which is a great art house out at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And that used to be a theater. That's where we did Three Sisters with Margaret Hamilton, Wow. So I got to look at that, and they had their archives, they had the books, and I said, yes, look, here it is. So, same theater, and they had me speak at the screening of The Warriors there. So, yeah, it's, it was really good fortune to be, be part of that, Walter Hill's third film as a director, I think, something like that.
Right.
And just the elements that were in it that keep unfolding. I always say what I like in music or art is a kind of encyclopedic, I don't know how you say that word, thing. Okay. Something has layers in it, something that has references other things and gives you a richness, And so there's something about that movie, Of course, we were dealing with the fact that there was real hardcore actor studio method gangster movies coming just before us, Taxi Driver and The Godfather and Mean Streets and all these things. So to have something that was more of a Roger Corman attitude, who's a brilliant guy and in turn was in The Godfather himself.
Yeah.
This is the style that Larry Gordon and Walter Hill had for this. It was going to be a Western. Walter calls his movies Westerns all the time. And when you go, I did not read the original novel by Saul Urich until well after, just rather recently.
Okay.
And to see the influences that he had going into it, he has John Milton, he has Paradise Lost, which is the pandemonium section in Paradise Lost, where all the demons come together, after they've revolted from God, and they're gonna, I don't know what they're gonna do, but they're, they meet together, they're gonna be demons, and then there was another book that influenced Saul Urich. There was John Milton. There was a book called The Water Margin, which was Mao Zedong's favorite book. And it was about all the Chinese outlaws and mountain rebels who were going to come together and take over, So that was another element. So all these elements that are in there, plus the Greek, the story of the Anabasis by Xenophon is in there. And then this Western that Walter Hill was going to do, and to have all that layered in there is really cool. And it's like his idea, which is the classic comic strips, the classic comic books, which I read myself, that was his thing back in the 50s and 60s. You had these things, which is a comic book telling of the Odyssey, for instance, or, whatever, some, I don't know, different stories in comic book form. And so that's why he finally put out that director's cut, where he cut in different comic book panels. That was his original plan, but they didn't have the money for it back then. But it was really, really great. And to get into it in that way and do our best with that material and show New York, it's always listed as made in New York, interesting study of what was going on in New York, because it was a crazy time. The 70s in New York was violent and crazy. And, the famous headline in the New York Post, Gerald Ford says to New York, drop dead. They said, they weren't going to get any federal help for anything that they were going through and stuff like that, and so it was a crazy time. And that's when I was working in these clubs, and I was, it sounds too harsh to call it homeless, but I was, there was a guy who robbed me, lived right next to me.
That's nice of him. Very neighborly.
In my apartment when I was making it.
Wow.
But I have to say, I looked really out of time. This was 1978. And because of the show that Walter and the producers see me in, Working, which was created by Stephen Schwartz from Studs Terkel's book, interviews with people talking about what they do all day. And Stephen Schwartz, who wrote Wicked and Godspell and Pippin and all these shows, had this idea to do a version of Working where 5 actors or 10 actors who can do all these different things. And I played guitar in that, and we sang James Taylor songs in that, and that he wrote specifically for the show, and this was just before I did The Warriors. That's where I was discovered, was on Broadway in Working by Walter Hill and Larry Gordon. They came to see that, and so my hair, Stephen Schwartz, because of my character, who was an insane copy boy. He was a guy, who seemed like a hippie, but he was really violent underneath. And it was odd to say, but it was a hilarious monologue, by this guy just talking about what he wanted to do to all his bosses. And so they saw that and said, well, this seems right for Luther, the villain in our piece. And that's how it came about, but my hair was so long and out of time because this was the punk rock time. This was John Travolta and Saturday Night Fever time, that was that styled look. It wasn't this long hair, but it was interesting because it made me look different than anybody else in the movie, and
Truly.
It seemed to work out.
Warriors, come out to play. Warriors, come out to play. Warriors, come out
stood out, and that's the whole point, right?
Yeah, I think it just looked like a crazed kind of Manson-esque kind of
Yeah.
Person, and made it distinctive, so you could remember what was going on with him.
Yeah, Luther as a character is not like physically imposing by any means, but he is completely unhinged and unpredictable, and you're like transfixed because you don't know what's even motivating this guy most of the time as a viewer.
Yeah, the complexity of why he did that and what it's all about. I didn't overanalyze it, because it's good not to do that. I didn't even read, Saul Urich's book during it because I just wanted to stick to Walter's script, which was so different, and try to bring as much life as you could to that, But, the world I was living in, which was a danger. You had to be street smart. I lived in a tiny apartment, $150 a month down on Spring Street, and this kind of semi-gangster guy lived next to me, and you just had to watch your step, you had to know, and so he or somebody he sent, came in through my window and emptied out my apartment, stuff like that, But he was the guy who would, I'd see him on the street and I'd say, hey, how you doing? He'd say, Dave. So he became the basis for the original.
Oh man.
I said, that's some crazy stuff. So I'm gonna use that, doing my good actor homework. You got to be like an anthropologist and pick it up. You can't take it from other movies. You got to take it from real life.
Totally.
So
that's incredible. And you probably don't get past that as neighbors, right? Once
well, I was gone by then. I mean, that was the message, they didn't nail a fish on my door or anything like that. But that was the message, it's time to go, because the good old landlord there had helped me on a number of occasions. He was very sympathetic to me being an actor, and all trying to do these different things, and practicing music up there. But they must have had somebody who was going to pay more or something like that, and and it's oddly enough, it's still there, that building. And I was down at a Ralph Lauren store, and these two sales guys, I said, I used to live here in Spring. They said, where? I said, told them the address. They said, that's where we live. I said, we live in your apartment. They live, these two guys.
You want your fish back?
Right. Sure, the rent is similar. Yeah.
I think they pay like $3,000 or something like that.
Sure.
Well, and I'm thinking about, unfortunately, you having your place robbed and then asking Dave, and he would say something like, well, I just like doing things like that. Because your character says that at the end, right? You say that to Swan, Michael Beck, when he asks you, why'd you do it? And I always thought about this crazed guy. Unfortunately, we know way too many people like that nowadays who just do things for no motivation, and just so
chaos.
It's chaos. And is as cult as some people look at it as a time capsule movie. There's so many themes I think that still can hold up today, and your character being this, like Dustin said, not imposing physically, but this idea of manipulating people to do what you want them to do. And it turns into an interesting discussion, especially with what's going on today,
Yeah, I think that kind of hypnotic effect, it said. And I honestly do not know where that came from. Walter just asked me to make something up, that chant thing at the end. And I sort of do. I mean, I've been theorizing about it for a long time, but I was an off-Broadway actor and working at CBGBs. And so some of that is the crazy stuff. You can hear a song. There's a song called, I won't remember, Fly Your Kite on my CD, live CD from that. And you can hear a little bit of elements of that in there, because people were trying to do creative thing, trying to do different things, and So it comes from that and the off Broadway stuff that was going on, and you know, there is something about that you know, that the emotion of it. You know, I think I was picking up on the emotion and the anger of being homeless and being, you know, fighting against this power structure, even if it was like a gangster power structure or you know, the governmental power structure around. You know, there's this thing that people identify with, that's irrational. You know, that goes beyond it. It's just a fierce anger, and we see it so much now, so much. You know, and you know, they can't articulate it. They'll make up any reason in the world, you know, to do it, but it's just this feeling because of, you know, the situations, you know, the conditions that we live in, the conditions people find themselves in, you know, between a rock and a hard place. And trying to do something to alleviate that, you know. And you know, I work and try to do artwork and you know, volunteer work and political work to try to help people find avenues to deal with that, you know, to be able to articulate something that they haven't been able to articulate. And I think, going back to what you're saying, not being physically imposing, but it's still terrorized, you know.
Oh, totally.
I couldn't go out for 2 years because I'd go to a club and people would want to fight me.
Oh, geez.
You know, because you said,
wow.
You know, I couldn't go a couple of years. I wouldn't go out because people would be angry back at me, you know, saying like, I'm not afraid of you. You know, they wouldn't say that, but that would be the feeling.
Yeah.
You know, said, you don't scare me. Yeah. You know, and, but apparently it did, you know, apparently it tweaked them when they were sitting there in the movie theater or whatever it was. I was an actor. It's changed a lot over my career, but in the early days, I wouldn't go see the movies it did. There's a thing of not wanting to make yourself self-conscious, you know?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go see it. I didn't see it for many years. And finally I sat at what was it? I can't remember, some art movie place in New York, and saw it. And the way that it built up to that chant is fantastic. It just builds up into this quiet thing where the hearse is coming, you know, and I finally got it. Why is this such a, you know, I felt it in the moment when we made it, you know. I said, that's something, you know, and Walter knew it too, you know. The guys in the Rogues gang didn't quite get it at the time. But it didn't take very long to do, you know. We only did a couple takes, you know, and Walter said, bring the bottles up slowly, you know, and then we just did it, you know. And I was a little bit surprised that they kept it in, but I kind of had a feeling that it worked. Even just when we were making it, I kind of knew that it worked. And and it was so odd and so, you know, weird that it would put us in the right place to finish up the movie there.
I mean, that more than anything has lasted, you know, beyond. They use it at Golden State Warriors games to get people riled up.
I've never heard that, but there's a wonderful TV producer who I have a beautiful daughter who's getting ready for Halloween today, and she's 13, and she went to school with a friend of ours whose kids are the same age, and he was a Marine. He's a TV producer for NBC now. And he said when he was at, I don't know where it was, Paris Island training, and they'd play sort of like paintball exercises to fight each other. And you'd hear people chanting it from over the hill, he told me, you know, from the other side of the hill, they'd hear people chanting it, you know. So that was the funniest one I ever heard.
But stands out so much.
It really does. It's just, so you just picked up these 3 bottles that you had?
Well, no, he found them. You know, it was just nothing. We just in the script you could read the hearse rolls up, they get ready, and they go out and fight. You know, but Walter said, "I want something more." You know, and so we just thought about it. And out there at Coney Island at the time, they'd sell these little tiny beer bottles and little bottles of beer, and at first I picked up Pigeons, you know, Joel Weiss had to remind me of this, the guy who plays Cropsy, my second in command.
Great guy, by the way. Really nice guy.
Great guy. And because they would poison the pigeons at Coney Island because they were a big nuisance for the shopkeepers and everything like that. And so there were a number of them standing around. I was going to hold up 3 dead pigeons, you know, and Walter said, no, that's not quite it. So I guess, you know, it comes from Liz Swados. I don't know if you know that name. She was a wonderful composer. She wrote a play that won some Tonys, I think, Runaways, which was on Broadway. She's gone now, sadly, but she was the big composer. When Julie Taymor, who's the Lion King lady in a number of films, you know, she started with Liz Swados. You know, she just did little puppets with Liz Swados at La Mama, Cafe La Mama, great off Broadway theater in New York. Cool. And Liz, you know, was always beating pots and pans or having, you know, people ring little bells and stuff like that. So I think it came from that kind of experimental headset, you know, that I went out there and said, and also give it up to Brando, you know, that great scene in on the waterfront where Eva Marie Saint's glove falls and he just picks it up and he puts it on his hand and you know, that kind of improvisation inspired me, you know, Chaplin and, you know, my great teacher, Marcel Marceau, you know, the kind of things of making something from nothing, you know, you have to invent in the moment and make a gesture that's, you know, meaningful, you know, and so that's how it came about. And, you know, Walter said to me, you know, he'd seen me in working where I was singing James Taylor's, you know, mill work ain't easy, mill work ain't hard. And he said, I want you to sing him something. I said, oh man, what am I, you know, I didn't want to do some lyrical thing. You know, I said, you know, and that's the way it came out. Wow. So he, you know, that he stuck with it and I admire him for doing that, you know, and they had a screening not too long ago at I think Tarantino owns it now, some theater in LA.
New Beverly. Yeah.
Is that his?
Yep.
Edgar Wright held a screening and he had Walter and Larry Gordon and Joel Weiss was there. I couldn't go. I was doing a play here in New York. But, you know, he talked about it there, you know, and how, you know, and you had Walter imitating me saying that, which you never, you know, which was Edgar Wright said, it's one of the greatest moments of my life.
Right.
To hear Walter Hill imitate that line.
Well, you specifically, you know, you mentioned how you improv that scene essentially and it stayed with us, right? All these decades later. And I think about personally, and Dustin and I were talking about this too, so many of your performances stay with you over the years, over the decades. You know, our show focuses heavily on the 80s and the early 90s. That's kind of our pocket. But if we went up and down your filmography, we could say that about every performance you've been in, you know, from Dreamscape and Commando. And sometimes these smaller performances have a huge impact overall. And that's the character that stands out the most, you know, the Crow. But then, like I was saying to Dustin, you know, the highlight of the movie Flirting with Disaster is you, your scene in that movie, you know, it's so you have this, and I'm sorry to keep like, you know, going off about you, fanboying, I guess, but it's all true. It's all true. Your performances stand the test of time. They really do.
Well, you're very kind. I hope so. I always told young actors when I'm talking someplace, people invite me from time to time to speak, and they say, you know, you have to work on it as if the whole movie is about you. You know, you got to work on it that way. But at the same time, you have to know what it's about, you know, and this gets into acting theory, you know, Stanislavski's 3 famous books, you know, there's one called Building a Character, and in there, he uses he doesn't say it, but it translates that. It's a legal term, sine qua non, which means without which no, without which no. And it's sort of the tent pole of everything you do. So you have to figure out what the story is and then how you can help that story happen. And the story is generally the protagonist doing something. It's not a theme. It's not man's inhumanity to man. It's not the political landscape. It's somebody doing something and how you can fit into helping that happen. You know, Arnold wants to get his daughter back. You know, the Warriors want to get home, you know, and how you can fill that in. And it becomes like a painting, you know, it becomes like a painting. And you see your favorite paintings, you know, if there's a group painting and that one little character up in the corner there was not there or turned a different way, the whole thing would be ruined. So if you can make it happen and you can make it, you know, help the painting and complete the picture, then you're doing your job, you know, and it makes it more fun too. It's been endlessly enriching. The overlapping of different research that I've done, it's been fantastic. I'm doing Into the Woods now. Yeah. And I'm using stuff that I learned in Chinese theater school when I was over in Beijing, you know, and, you know, it just makes for a rich life, you know, and plus, you know, all that studying, you know, I told you all the books that are involved in the Warriors for me, you know, the great Water Margin, which I urge you to read. It's this stuff that you see in Crouching Tiger,
Hidden Dragon?
Yeah, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. You see it in, if you know Wong Kar-wai's movie, The Grandmaster, the greatest martial arts movie I've ever seen, you know.
Terrific.
All these things are in these Chinese classic literature, you know. And, you know, to take it back, one of my great heroes is a French actor, Antonin Artaud. Now, Artaud was big influence on my generation of actors. You know, he was a friend of the Surrealists. He was a poet and a wonderful actor. If you've ever seen Carl Dreyer's The Passion of Joan of Arc with Marie Falconetti, and if you haven't, I urge you to see it. And Abel Gantz's Napoleon, you know, which is this amazing epic that Coppola brought back. Artaud is in those, and he's great. He plays the friendly monk to Joan of Arc, Saint Joan, but he wrote these theories of what should be theater, and one of them was Asian theater techniques. One of the ideas, and so I've studied martial arts for many years. I started quite late. I started when I was 35 years old, you know, and then spent 20 years in martial arts. You know, got a couple black belts in traditional karate.
Oh, wow.
And it really, you know, amazingly enriches your life, you know. And when we were working on The Crow, I told Brandon, you know, that I was just about to go for my first black belt, you know, and that was 93. So I was 42 or something like that, you know. And he said, "Oh, I'll train with you." You know, we were trying to keep distance, you know, actor discipline on there, but a wonderful guy, wonderful fellow, and so he was going to train with me, but the tragedy ensued.
Man, you know, that's a bummer.
But incredible tragedy. But we did that one piece of art and kept his legacy alive, you know. And I spoke to him first day on the set. I said, "Your father was a big influence on me." He said, "Yeah, me too," you know. And you know, so. It was great to be a part of that because, you know, part of acting and artwork is to do stuff from where you are. And I'd never done anything from Detroit. And even though that's a comic book fictional Detroit, you know, that's one of the reasons I signed on to The Crow, you know.
Really?
Do that. Yeah.
Well,
and I was touched by his story too. You know, I was not so thrilled with the original artwork or everything in the comic book, but I was touched by the true life story of James O'Barr, you know, and his tragic loss of his girlfriend and going through this horrible emotion. And I thought the emotion was translated in the comic book. So I said, well, that'd be a good thing to try to help tell that story.
What? What do you want? What is it? What? Speak to me. Speak.
Did you send us these complaints? Come here. Abashed, the devil stood. Does it get you sweating?
I know you. I know you. I knew you. I knew you. But you ain't you. You can't be you. We put you through the window. There ain't no coming back. This is the really real world. There ain't no coming back. We killed your dad. There ain't no coming back. There ain't no coming back. There ain't no coming back.
Rona, you mentioned something. You were a huge influenced by Bruce Lee, and it makes me think of your role in Dreamscape as Tommy, because
the nunchucks and the
yeah, and you're talking about that motivation, you know, and like the history of your character. And I wonder in that movie, in Dreamscape, really quick, about how, you know, you have an interaction with Dennis Quaid's character, and you almost seem to want to have a connection with him, but he's also a cocky guy, and it suddenly shuts you down. And I'm wondering, like, the Bruce Lee connection there, already kind of being the king shit, so to speak, of the lab, and then suddenly this new guy comes in. All those kind of pieces come together to make you who you are, and obviously your backstory with your father and all that stuff.
I think that competition was important, but I don't know if he really considered it. He just knew that he was better in a way. Tommy Ray, he kind of knew that he was better. Dennis's character was able to fight against it, but I think he probably saw something there, that he was looking for camaraderie in one way or another, you know, to some kind of somebody to recognize him. But that was a great shoot. You know, I did watch all those movies, you know, because this gets into maybe something that you're interested in for your show, the 80s action movies, because there used to be what I called that I learned at Wayne State University, a bifurcation between art movies and action movies in the 70s and 80s. It came together in Tarantino and all these later folks, you know, but before that, one side of the street was Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson. The other side was Bergman and, you know, Fellini and stuff. You know, and you never, you know, you had to go past. And at one point in the 70s, I think that's when it started, maybe the 80s, they had all the action, you know, the Chinese action movies, you know, Fist of Fury and, you know, all these great movies. And so I was part of that, and I watched that well before doing Dreamscape. And so that had a truth to it too, you know, doing all those. I did not know nunchucks, you know, and I had a great teacher for that, you know, Jeff Imada is a brilliant, he was a student of a sort of classmate and friend of Bruce Lee, Jeff Imada. So he choreographed all that for me in Dreamscape, the great nunchuck scene.
You guys like Bruce Lee movies? I saw Enter the Dragon 6 times. You blew it, Alex. While you were fooling around with Novotny, I was learning how to take advantage in here. In this world, you're nothing, Alex. And me, I'm God.
And they were going to have a stunt guy do it before I trained so hard for it, and put a ninja mask on him, you know? And then when I was going to do it, he said he wanted me to wear the ninja mask too. And I said, you won't let him see it's me, you know?
I worked so hard.
And so he agreed to that. Joe Rubin let me do it that way and design the chucks with the, you know, the spikes on the end of them and stuff like that. But then I found out that Bruce Lee in Last of the Dragon used rubber lightweight nunchucks for his, you know, just for smart reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Cheating,
found out.
that's why. Yeah, no.
Well,
Very smart.
mine were wooden, and so my elbows were black and blue
Oh,
from learning that and going over and over. You know, I was really hurting after training so hard with Jeff. You know, but he did great choreography. It was really cool, and you know, it's a scene that I really love to this day. You know, and
likewise, yeah.
you know, Dreamscape was also cool because it was one of the last pre-CGI movies, you know.
Right.
It had the old Ray Harryhausen type of animation in it, you know. And we had to sculpt those snake transformations piece by piece, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Crazy.
And so that was big fun for me, you know, being a mime and a mask maker and all that kind of stuff, to go to use something that was so, you know, theatrical, and you know, have it work in that wonderful way, you know.
Were you in the chair for a long time with that, putting that makeup on for the snake head?
Yeah, that one took quite a while. Yeah.
I bet.
I can't remember that. Craig Reardon, is that the guy's name? He did the special effects on that, and there was a wonderful Japanese assistant lady that did the mask work in there. So doing all the body casting and everything else took quite a long time, you know. But I love that, you know. I always now rate different movies, you know, for you know, like what was the one that Tim Curry did, Legend, something like that.
Legend, yeah.
He had great mask
the
making.
devil and
the, yeah. And so people who can do that, I like to judge those scenes, their mask work, how their mask work was, you know. And I think we did a pretty good job in Dreamscape.
Oh yeah, I think it's a very underappreciated film. I think it's actually gained a bigger audience in the past maybe 10, 20 years. But you went from terrifying me personally in The Warriors to terrifying me again in Dreamscape, and having nightmares about you and waking up and screaming out for my mom because
the snake man. Yeah.
And then, you know, flash forward a decade later and you're in The Crow as T-Bird, and I'm thinking, okay, well, you know, he's terrifying me again, but I'm a teenager, late teenager now, and so you're not giving me nightmares, you're just still creeping me out.
Well, you know,
so thank you.
hopefully you got the point of the story, though, which was, you know, that good triumphs over evil, and, you know, the bad guys don't win, you know. That was the point. You know, we put that after the tragic passing of Brandon, you know, they had one close-up left, and they still hadn't done the demise of T-Bird. And so they had one close-up of Brandon, which is in the movie, where he's just silent looking at me. And the rest of that is a body double of Chad Stelsky. Do you know that name?
Yes.
The stuntman?
Yep.
The stunt and director now. He directed John Wick, and he directed on and on now, you know.
Yep. Which obviously you were part of.
Yeah, I did that couple of scenes in the first John Wick, and Stelsky, you know, was Keanu Reeves' body double in the Matrixes. And so Keanu was the one who gave him the script and said, I want you guys to do this. Stelsky and his partner, David Leitch, you know, who now they've separated and become separate directors now. But the first John Wick was the both of them. And that was a treat. I've always really admired stunt people, you know, and one of my proudest moments was in Last Man Standing, where
Doyle,
where I get shot, and you know, I wasn't wearing any pads, but they put a pad on the ground, but I took the fall for myself, where you know, spoiler alert here for everybody, but you know, where I get shot, you know, and they gave me a stuntman's pin, a stuntman's association pin for it,
nice.
Because it was supposed to be my body double, but I did it myself, and it worked out very good, you know.
Amazing. Did you refuse to have the stunt double do it?
No, I just said, you know, I can do this, you know, and you know, he was there. He still gets paid. Doesn't matter, you know.
Right.
And there've been some great stunt guys, you know, great, you know, Roy Farfeld's one guy who did it, and just most recently in Ray Donovan, the finale to Ray Donovan, you know, but he's done about 4 or 5 movies. And there's another guy in LA who was on 48 Hours and stuff, you know, the guy who, when Eddie opens the car door in 48 Hours and I go flying over it, that was a great stunt guy who did that, you know.
Yeah, and, I was just gonna say you had stunt guys for that, but thank goodness, because you might not be here today if getting your ass kicked constantly, you know.
Yeah, that was a big one. Yeah, but he keeps on ticking, and you know, the thing in Commando was you know, hanging on a big long line, you know, where Arnold was supposed to be holding me there, you know, and but we shot it for so long, it was hours and hours, you know, but
oh God.
But it was cool. He was great. Arnold was very humble and encouraging, and we had a very good time.
Was Arnold physically picking you up at any point?
No.
Okay.
Well, yeah, he did pick me up when we first go over, and then he holds me over the cliff. But after, when he's holding me over the cliff, it's a cable that you can see, you know.
Thank God.
It's a great story. There was a wonderful stunt guy on that, Benny Dobbins, who was a Western stunt guy. And he had a big, you know, the stunt guys back then, he had a big tooled leather, you know, it looked like Elvis's guitar strap or something. And they wear it on their belt buckle, and they put it down their leg. And they, you know, because they would play the American Indians in the Westerns in the 50s, you know.
Yeah.
And they'd get pulled off their horses when they were shot. You know, it was rough. I don't know how the hell they did that, but they, you know, he'd get yanked off his horse. They'd be riding along, you know, shooting bows and arrows and guns, and then they'd get shot and be yanked off their horse, you know, so it looked spontaneous, you know. And so Benny let me wear his very own award-winning belt buckle to be held upside down until my head almost exploded by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Remember, Sally, when I promised to kill you last?
That's right, Major. You did.
I lied.
You know, it was up there. I did have veins pulsing in my brain for a long time after.
I was gonna say
that's a long time to be upside down.
But it was a cool, you know, that going back to that division between art movies, you know, and how they slowly came to be revered, you know, and how everybody wants to be in action movies now, you know, all the top actors, you know, want to do them. It's because you can say so much about the world around us at the same time. Commando was so interesting because it was Reagan's America, and it showed, you know, Arnold was I call him his id monster at the time. It was sort of the, you know, I can do anything anywhere, you know, but I will reserve my power and be peaceful, you know, and that's what the story of it was. And so to get all this information about it, you know, my character, Sully, was part of a ever-growing and now is quite dangerous private army. You know, the fascists have private armies now, you know, whether it's the Wagner group in Russia or the, you know, Eric Prince's group here, you know, Blackwater, those kind of people, you know, they're around and being hired for money. And that's what Sully represented. You know, there was, you know, I got stuff, Freedom of Information Act. I got things about counterinsurgency in South America at the time, and gave it to Joel Silver, and he used it for the uniforms for the people that played the soldiers that Arnold did away with, you know. And there were these manuals that you could get from the government about what was happening in South America at the time. And, you know, so there's a lot. And I read a great book by the now gone Christopher Dickey. James Dickey wrote Deliverance. He was the poet laureate of the United States under Jimmy Carter. And his son, Christopher Dickey, was he's gone now, sadly, but he started the Daily Beast. But before that, he was an award-winning journalist around, and he did a famous book called With the Contras, He went, and embedded himself with the Contras, and did this in Nicaragua, and did a great book. And that was also part of the research for that, And so this is what I'm saying. Even in a cartoony kind of shoot 'em up like Commando, you can be indicating and sort of talking about things that are really going on in the world that are important, And this growing mercenary army thing is quite fascinating, That is a I even used that again on a episode of a short-lived TV series called Kidnapped, and it's talking about there's many corporations have their own private armies now, there's many, and this is a interesting and growing subject. And I worked on Commando. I saw a 60 Minutes interview with 2 ex-military bodyguards for an investor, Robert Vesco, who was part of Nixon's entourage. And he did a bunch of tax fraud and had to live in Cuba at the end of his life. And so these 2 guys were talking about their life as guns for hire, as mercenaries. And so it's that's the kind of stuff that you can indicate. You can sort of, going back to your idea of being a small character, but you can really put some interesting texture and story and atmosphere and support for the main story in the story by the work that you do,
No doubt.
Amazing. Well, we want to be mindful of your time, and we really appreciate having you here.
Fantastic speaking with you, gentlemen.
We'll
do it again sometime.
Thank you so much for your time.
Best wishes. God bless.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be
Take
well.
care.